I hate to report it, but it did happen. The Duke football team has lost a game under head football coach Mike Elko as Kansas defeated them. A battle of the unbeatens took place this last weekend in Lawrence, Kansas. The Jayhawks came out on top. Still tons of positive things to like about the effort from this Duke football team. We're going to discuss that and a whole lot more. You don't want to miss it here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
Vital. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. It's so great to have you here with us on this Tuesday. My name is J.J. Jackson. I proudly serve as the host of Locked On Blue Devils. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you follow and subscribe to our podcast for free wherever you get your podcast. A daily podcast talking about everything going on in the world of Duke athletics. Yesterday, we saw the start of the men's basketball season. First practice held by head coach Jon Scheyer. We'll continue to talk about that throughout the week and a whole lot more. But we want to talk football today as they're now 4 games into the year, a third of the way through the upcoming season. And my buddy Josh Cox is going to stop by to join us on the show. If you haven't done so already as well, make sure you follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils and follow me on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. I continue to be blown away by our growth on YouTube and your ability to watch the show daily each and every day. Please subscribe, share the videos with your friends. Your support means the world to us here at Locked On Blue Devils. And now thrilled to have yet another weekly conversation with my good pal Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. Sadly, Josh, the Duke football team did lose on Saturday to Kansas. They've lost a game under the leadership of Mike Elko, but man, there are a ton of positive things to take away. Where do you want to start when we talk back on this Duke and Kansas football game?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could start with the fact, the atmosphere there in Lawrence, a packed house, 50,000 people. We spoke to both Jacob Monk and Dwayne Carter. They both mentioned that it was actually louder than what they had expected. Jacob mentioned that it was the loudest stadium he had been in since he'd been at Duke. And so that was really cool, shout out to them, shout out to their fans for showing up. And so I think we start there. I mean, they were legitimate. I believe Jalen Daniels lived up to the hype, maybe even in a little bit different way. We spoke about how well he ran the football, and he really beat us with his arm, on Saturday. And so he showed really how versatile he truly is. And so, kudos to them, first of all. I believe personally that Duke did not play a great football game. I believe we played decent, but there were a lot of mistakes, beginning with tackling. I believe that's the main takeaway from this game, is that we did not wrap up and tackle and finish plays on defense. I think Dwayne Carter acknowledged it. Coach Elko in his presser on Monday acknowledged it. Steve Wiseman tweeted out, I believe it was Pro Football Focus, said we had 19 broken tackles against our defense in that game. The one long touchdown, Daniel Highshaw, there were multiple broken tackles on that one.
That play was crazy. That was really an unbelievable play.
It really was. But at the end of the day, I think that's where we start. We start with Kansas is legit. Duke didn't tackle. Those two things together make for a difficult road to hoe to get a win.
And a really good atmosphere, like you said, there in Lawrence. That stadium was packed out. They wanted to see Duke and Kansas play a meaningful game and something outside of basketball. Again, we will get that come November. We will get that in the Champions Classic this season. But to see both those teams go head-to-head on the gridiron, and you mentioned the offense for Kansas. Man, they were throwing the ball like crazy. And we did preview the Jayhawks so much, talking about Daniels, their quarterback's ability to run. but really the arm talent was what was so impressive in Saturday's game against Duke. And it's funny that now on Saturday, watching the game unfold nationally, Duke and Kansas football has become a topic of conversation. And I think everybody's major takeaway was Jalen Daniels can play a little bit of quarterback. That was pretty crazy to see.
Yeah, he was really good. I felt like Grimm was really good there at receiver and finding his spots. I believe Duke's got to shore up that zone coverage out in the secondary. The gaps are a little too big out there, and so I felt like we gave him time. And we did sack him. I believe it was the first sack of the season. Joshua Pickett got in there and sacked Jalen Daniels. But yeah, I mean, once again, kudos to them. Lance Leipold's done a great job in his second season as their head coach. There was a lot of talk and chatter going into this game, and they delivered. And so at the end of the day, we did hold them 18 points underneath their season average of points per game. After the first quarter was over, we held them to under 100 yards rushing in the second, third, and fourth quarter. So I felt like there were some positives to take away from this game. And then another positive is I know everyone's talking about the Kansas quarterback, but how about the Duke quarterback, man?
Yeah.
How about Leonard? Like, certainly the touchdown numbers were not there. Only one touchdown. But once again, throwing the ball accurately, running the ball effectively, and he's a sophomore that people were saying was gonna be the worst quarterback in the ACC heading into the season. So shout out to Riley Leonard.
The future's so bright. I mean, you talk about the atmosphere, and it really did feel at points in that first quarter like, yeah, this game is going to be over super quick. Like Kansas is just going to run away with this, given the atmosphere, given how quickly they scored. Again, this is a Duke football team that in the very first game of the season, as we well talked about, Josh, they didn't give up any points at all. So how does this team respond when the opposition scores and falls behind early in that football game? And Duke just marches right back down the field. They put a drive together themselves. So there were moments in the game where they really did not let what Kansas was doing totally defeat them. Let's talk a little bit more about that in detail after our first time out here on today's program. Locked On Blue Devils today is brought to you by our friends over at Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. With every purchase, I'm earning cash back thanks to Upside. To get started, download the free Upside app, use my promo code LOCKED, LOCKED, and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Next, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. Check in at the business, pay as usual with credit or debit card, and get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside. Upside users are earning more than $1 million every week. That's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED, LOCKED. Welcome back into Locked On Blue Devils here on this Tuesday. JJ Jackson alongside my buddy Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. What do you want to add as we sort of continue our conversation just about Duke's ability there early in the game? Touchdown drives are going to happen, but they were ready to be competitive the entire game.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, to see a guy like Eli Pancol once again get behind the defense, which he has consistently done this entire season, to see him with another, I think this one was a 49-yarder from Riley, and the ball was placed perfectly. And Eli, if you look at the replay, was having his jersey grabbed going down the field as well, and still made the catch. And so I thought that was a positive right there. I think it's great that we've seen our running backs get into the end zone every game. Jalen Coleman's 4 games played, 4 touchdowns. That's a positive. I thought Jordan Waters looked good. Kind of weird their stats didn't back up this, but I really felt like we could have run the ball a little bit more on that defense. Stats didn't, like I said, stats don't back up what I just said, but the eye test, I mean, it really looked like we could move the ball on them on the ground, and we didn't do that as much. But But anyway, so I think those are positives. Jalen Calhoun and Jordan Moore, once again, positives. I think on the offensive side of the ball, the main drive that really impressed me was we're in the fourth quarter. There's about, I believe, 9 minutes to go, and we're down 15. And it's our ball. And instead of just kind of, tucking our tail between our legs and taking this 28-point, loss or whatever, we put together a really strong drive. Samir Hagans caught a first down and stretched for the marker there for us. John Tavis Robertson caught a big pass as we went down the field there and eventually scored. And so that was the Jalen Calhoun touchdown in the corner. So at the end of the day, I thought Duke showed some resiliency. We had a chance to tie the game up there at the end and just didn't have enough time left on the clock. And so once again, we come out of this 4-game block that we've spoken about, right? The season divided up into 4 games. This first 4-game block, we come out 3-1, which is what I had us coming out at, by the way. I remind my fellow guys on the Section 17 podcast that I was right. But I had us coming out 3-1. But I'll be honest with you, I feel better about the way we've come out 3-1 than I expected. And I think this team is primed and ready to make some noise in the ACC Coastal this year, which is completely wide open. And so no one really holds that. Maybe you could say Pittsburgh maybe right now. But other than that, it's wide open. And so I think Duke's going to make some noise, and I'm looking forward to it.
That drive you're talking about there in the fourth quarter started at the 8-yard line, by the way. 10 plays, 92 yards, nearly 5 minutes time of possession for Duke to make it a 28-20 game, as you said, when they were down by 15 points. Impressive work there from the Blue Devils. And then once again, they had another drive right after that when they go back down by 15, 35-20, and put together a 7-play, 70-yard drive set up by a nice kickoff return by John Tavius Robertson. Field position is so vital and that sort of thing. And then, you're right. We talk about what Daniels was able to do at quarterback for Kansas. Let's give Riley some love, man.
Yeah.
24 of 35 for 324 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions, and was the leading rusher for Duke, 10 carries for 54 yards. Pretty great stuff there from QB.
It's been a while, hasn't it? It's been. Yeah. I think the answer is it's been at least 3 years since we've had a guy back there at quarterback that we felt like could zip the ball around and get it where it needed to go, and then obviously also use his legs, which Riley's not had to do as much, but he's very capable of doing. And so, shout out to him, man. Sophomore, no one believed in that kid outside of the Duke program, and he is really putting people on notice.
Take a look at the defense for Duke. Kansas able to play so well offensively, as we said, but again, held them under their scoring average for the year. Individual numbers, only 1 sack for that Duke defense. But you look at the tackles there, and once again, Darius Joyner right there at the top, the tackles machine with Shaka Hayward and Dorian Morosi right behind him as well.
Yeah, Darius, I mean, we've said this, and since we've seen him, in practices, he just has a knack for the football. Wherever the ball is, Darius Joyner will be soon there. And so, shout out to him. Anthony Nelson, shout out that fumble that he forced was really big. That was a really big turnover in the first half, and felt like if Kansas gone down and scored there, it could really have gotten out of hand. And so I think that was a very big deal. And the defense really was a bend don't break style on Saturday. I mean, that offense it's next level, man. Like they are good and they keep you guessing, and it's very difficult to zero in on anything. You say, "Oh, zero in on the quarterback." Well, that's fine. We can say that, and then it leaves open so many other gaps. And so, at the end of the day, the defense, I felt like the second, third, and fourth quarter, especially our defense, really did dig in, made the stops when we had to make them. And here's the thing. They gave us an opportunity to drive and tie the football game up. And at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for.
Indeed. Good stuff there from Duke. Again, unfortunately, they did lose 35-27 against Kansas. Duke football now 3-1 on the year, and all 4 of their non-conference games are over with. They're not going to have another non-conference game come up. We jump into ACC play, and it starts on Saturday with the Virginia Cavaliers, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today. Want to make sure we let you know about our friends over at Locked On ACC. Get your fix on the Atlantic Coast Conference by making Locked On ACC your second listen or second watch every day. Host Candace Cooper and local experts of Locked On, like myself, take you across the conference in 30 minutes. I love my weekly visits over there at Locked On ACC, talking a lot about this football conference. Make Locked On ACC your second listen every single day. All right, we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson alongside my buddy Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. Tell me, what is the Section 17 podcast? What are you guys up to these days, Josh, as the ACC season gets set to get underway?
Yeah, we're cranking out weekly episodes of the Section 17 podcast. Just released one this morning, and so go check that out. We did a deep dive on our thoughts on the Kansas loss, and then we spoke in depth about this UVA game that's coming up this Saturday night. We spoke with John Freeman, the voice of the Virginia Cavaliers, and got some insight into their struggles, really, heading into this game. And so we try to do that every week. And so you can find our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want a direct link to it, you can hit DukeFootballTalk.com, and you can see the podcast there and go wherever you want to. So we really appreciate it, you having us on every week, JJ, and we enjoy talking Duke football as much as we possibly can.
It's a lot of fun for sure, and now we've got a conference game coming up. We've got the Virginia Cavaliers coming here. We talk often about our partners over at BetOnline. We saw the Blue Devils right after Saturday's games came to a close, open up as a 1.5-point favorite against Virginia. That number is going to continue to change like crazy throughout the week, as it always does. But going into this one, Virginia 2-2 on the season, Duke 3-1. What are some of those first thoughts that you have when you look at the matchup of two first-year head coaches?
Well, it's kind of interesting. You have a defensive-minded coach in Mike Elko, whose offense has been surprisingly good.
Right.
And then you have the offensive-minded Tony Elliott in his first season, whose defense has been surprisingly good. And so it really is kind of an odd, it's an odd matchup here. Tony Elliott's obviously was handed a program by Bronco Mendenhall that went 6-6 last year. Probably like a disappointing 6-6, to be honest with you. That program was better than 6-6. And so he took over, and I don't know that this is necessarily easier. He took over like a machine that was pretty well oiled, and then he had to come in and insert himself into that culture. And so there's that give and take there of like, man, there was already good culture built, and then he's got to come in and adapt. Whereas Mike Elko came in and the culture had kind of gone downhill so much that it was like, let's scrap everything. And this is 100% Mike Elko. So I don't know. It's been odd to see the struggles of Virginia on the offensive side of the football. As any football fan would know, their offense last year was elite. Broke tons of school records on offense. Brennan Armstrong was just throwing the ball all over the field, whatever he wanted to do, running the ball, throwing the ball. A lot like Jalen Daniels, to be honest with you, what we saw at Kansas. But that was Brennan Armstrong last year. For some reason this year, they've not been able to get on the same page. Him and the receivers, the timing, the new system that's been brought in by Tony Elliott, it's been a struggle for them. After their week 3 game, I heard Armstrong interviewed, and he made the statement that there was only a handful of times in that entire game where everybody was where they needed to be when they needed to be there. And they're just trying to learn. And so what that has caused is a lot of turnovers.
Yeah.
They've turned the ball over quite a bit. And so on the offensive side of the ball, it's kind of like a head scratcher because we see, their wide receivers run 6'2", 6'5", and 6'7". They are legit weapons. That's not counting Billy Kemp, the little 5'9" speedster that we'll see Saturday as well, from what we've heard. And they have all the weapons. And it's just kind of like, when is that going to click? So that's the question on offense for Virginia. Then on defense, wow. I mean, no one saw this coming. Like, who in the world would have thought that you struggle on defense last year, you bring in an offensive-minded head coach, and all of a sudden your defense is like next level elite. They're averaging, I think they're giving up 19 points a game. They've had 14 sacks in the first 4 games of the season. Their defensive line is great. Man, I don't know what to think. It's very interesting. If you'd have told us at the beginning of the year this is what it was going to look like, I would have never believed you.
Yeah, I mentioned Locked On ACC a lot, and it's obviously my weekly visits. Virginia is one of the teams that I'm always so kind of eager to talk about because it is so interesting with all of the offensive success that they had a year ago. You add in the offensive-minded coach and the conference's, some would argue, most productive passer from a year ago. You just wouldn't think that they'd have these offensive struggles. Virginia is averaging 18 points a game. The Virginia Cavaliers, with Brennan Armstrong, who threw for 1,000,000 yards a season ago, is averaging 18 points a game, and they're only averaging 212 passing yards a game, which is so strange compared to what we saw. But you're right to highlight the success that they've had defensively, only giving up 19 points a game. Duke's defense right there with them. Virginia's given up 19.3. Duke's defense has given up 19.5. Virginia's defense has been more stout, though, in the yards allowed department. They're not letting teams move the football that frequently around them. And then you look at the track record of these coaches. It's Tony Elliott, the offensive coordinator from Clemson. You would think the offense would be awesome. It's Mike Elko, as you said, Josh, the defensive coordinator from Texas A&M. You would have expected a lot of love for that Duke defense. It's strange that this is the 2 areas of each of these teams that we're talking about, though.
Yeah, it definitely is. And one note on the Virginia defense heading into this game Saturday is that starting linebacker Nick Jackson, who leads them in tackles, by far their leader over on that side of the football, was called for a targeting penalty in the second half of the game at Syracuse. And so he will be not playing the first half of this game, which I'm not a big fan of that rule, impacting the following game, but it is what it is. And so he will not play the first half of this game. And so that would be the equivalent for Duke fans of Shaka Hayward missing the first half of a football game. And we know what that would do and the kind of the strain that would put on the rest of the defense. And so that's something to keep our eyes open for as we look ahead to Saturday night.
I can't wait. It's going to be a fun one, 7:30 p.m. Eastern there at Wallace Wade Stadium. Can folks expect to see you in Section 17 on Saturday, Josh?
We will be there, rain or shine. Rain or shine, we will be there. And so this hurricane and the bad weather, we're keeping our eye on it, but it doesn't matter. If they're playing football, we're going to be there.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Josh, good to see you as always each and every week. We'll talk again soon, okay?
Have a good week, JJ. We'll see you, man.
That's my buddy Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast, and he's joining us here today on Locked On Blue Devils. Again, if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our podcast, leave us a 5-star rating and written review, and do the same for the Section 17 podcast. Those guys do a great job breaking down this football team each and every week. Follow us on Twitter at @LO_Blue Devils, and I'm on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. We'll continue to talk about Duke football throughout the week and also highlight the men's basketball season getting underway. That's coming up starting tomorrow right here on Locked On Blue Devils. That's going to do it for today's episode, though, of the program. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.